And so I just want to focus on that for a moment. Vayidom Aharon, Vayidom in Hebrew is stillness and silence. To stand dome in the army means you're standing up straight, not moving, silent, at attention. It's like the flag is going up, stop. And this in some ways is the heart of the Bible and the core strategy of how to deal with challenge. Something happens, there's a cause. Next, there's an effect. Something bad happens to me. I hear terrible news has happened. It's cause. I burst out crying and find my bed to go lie down and hide from the world. Effect, cause, effect. That's the way it works. The Torah is telling us something absolutely critical here. Vayidom, stop, be silent, be still, do not respond. There's a space in between the cause and the effect. There's a space between the stimulus and our response. We need to hold that space. Vayidom Aharon. In that space is our freedom to choose. The revolutionary Jewish psychiatrist Viktor Frankl writes in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. This is what he writes. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor Frankl, in one of the most powerful books that I've ever read, Man's Search for Meaning, rooted deeply in Jewish thought, he tells his experiences of living through the Nazi concentration camp in Auschwitz, watching people give up on life in total despair with no reason to live, suffering day after day, starving, being tortured day after day, physically and mentally. So many Jews just broke and gave up on life. But some people were committing suicide. The people, though, around them, some of them, found the strength not only to survive, but to help others around them in need. It's like some people are absolutely breaking, and then others are like emerging so strong. It's like, wow, how did they do that? That's so heroic. How did they find the inner strength? It was in the power of Vayidom. At the height of his greatest joy, tragedy hit Aaron, his two sons, who he had raised and trained to be the next leaders of Israel. They were struck down in front of all of Israel. Aaron holds the space between what happened to him and his response. Vayidom Aharon. He was silent and still. Here's another quote from Man's Search for Meaning. Everything can be taken from man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Anything can happen to us, but no one can take away our freedom to choose how we respond. Our freedom to choose how we respond, that's the agency that makes us uniquely human. That's why the culmination of the covenant is choose life. That's what Moses says in the book of Deuteronomy before the Jews go into Israel. The choice, we look at this tragedy in Israel, and before we blame the politicians and point fingers and shake our fists at heaven in resentment and anger, it's like, wait a minute, I want to create a space. I want to choose my response now. And in that way, I want to invite God into my life to face this tragedy together with him. My initial response to Meron, I was like King David. I'm like, I am pissed. What is going on here, God? Really? After all we've been through, a year of isolation, finally believers come together to worship you in goodness, to pray for Mashiach, and that's what they get. Like, why? What is going on here? But then I was like, wait a minute. God didn't do anything here. We did this, but our politicians are to blame. Our government in Israel has become so incompetent and dysfunctional. It's like in 2 years, we've had 4 elections. We're on our way to our 5th election. We're still not able to form a coalition. It's mostly because of people's egos and feelings. There's not even ideology here. It's just ridiculous. And in the chaos of years without a stable government and disorganization, tragedies like this are bound to happen. That's where most of Israel's attention is at right now. We're just so angry at our politicians and at the government. But there's no space there either. That's just pointing outside. It's like, wait a minute, pointing and blaming anyone outside of ourselves is not a good strategy. It's not the right question to ask. It's not useful. Nothing useful will come of that. Blaming God, asking why. It's like, we have no idea why, and we never, ever will, period. But the Hebrew language guides us to the right question here. It's pretty amazing. We want to ask the question why, and the Hebrew teaches us what really to ask. Look at the Hebrew word why for a second. The Hebrew word why is lama, but the same exact word, lema, for what? It's the same word, but it's just teaching us the right way to ask. Tehila taught me this idea in the name of Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. It's like, in matters of the ultimate, it's just improper to ask why. It's not in the human capacity to understand. Humans, it's not possible for us to know why. The proper question is, for what? Not lama, but lema. For what purpose? Lama, why, is looking at the cause. It's looking at the past. Lema, for what purpose, is looking at what we can learn right now for the future. For what? What is this situation calling me to do now? What is my purpose here now? What is my best response in this situation, in the space that we create? The Torah teaches us we take on full and total responsibility for the future. In that space, we have agency of choice and our own free will, and we need to take full ownership of our situation. People could say, full ownership of my situation. I mean, my child has cancer, God forbid. My husband just died. I'm alone now. And I with the responsibility of raising 9 children by myself. Now, I'm not saying you take responsibility for what happened, but in the space that you create, you take complete ownership of your response to that situation. Look at what Viktor Frankl says once again. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. There are things that are in our control, and there are things that are out of our control. And most of the things in our life are absolutely out of our control. The only thing that we can change is ourselves. To life, we can only respond by taking responsibility to fully own our response. Something happens to you, you take full responsibility. Think about that word. Look how it's written. Can we get that up on the screen? Responsibility. Look at the word. Response, ability. We have the ability to respond in any way that we want. You have the ability to respond. That is 100% in your control. That's the only thing we have complete control over, our ability to respond. Something happens. Vayidom. I'm not just going to immediately have a cause and effect. The spiritual and psychological practice is to create a space. If there's one consistent message throughout all of the Bible, you will find extreme responsibility. The prophets of Israel put the full weight of responsibility on the Jewish people. The prophets don't blame God. They don't blame other nations. Tragedy, that's our reality now. Had our nations been more unified, things might have been better now. All we can do is figure out how to be better from here on. And in that place, that's when we invite God into the tragedy. We've spoken about this before, but the word blessing in Hebrew, bracha, is the same root, so deeply connected to the word brecha, which means pool. It literally is the same letters. We're opening ourselves up to receive, like a pool being filled with water. Blessing. We're bringing God's blessing, his guidance into the equation here. It's like Israel is experiencing a day of national mourning in the situation for those families. Is too much pain for me to think about for too long. Stop, silence, stillness. It's like, how do I respond now? Lema, to what? What am I called to do now? That's the only thing we got. How we ask that question and how we answer that question is going to make all of the difference in a very real way. You are the sum total of choices you've made throughout your life up until right now. Your life situation, who you are, who you've married, everything that you've created is the sum total of choices that you've made throughout your life. Some of your choices were deliberate, some of them weren't. but your choices have brought you to where you are today. The more God is involved in your choices, believe me, the better your life will be. Think about it this way. Your future self will be made up exactly the same way. A good rule would be to make choices that your future self will thank you for. And if you invite God into the equation, that's a wonderful way to ensure that you are making a high-level choice and not just an immediate impulsive response. So now I want to address, how do we choose to respond in the space that you create? How exactly do we invite God into that place? What's the technology there? How do we invite God into that time, into our lives? And this is the answer from the Torah. You enter into a conversation with yourself. In Hebrew, this form of meditation is called hitbodedut, rooted in the word alone, boded. It's just you and yourself, boded, alone. Hitbodedut. You enter into a conversation with yourself. Ask and you shall receive. What does that mean? Ask the question. Something happened to me. How should I respond now? Tragedy hit me. Hashem, what do I do now? How should I respond? Wait. You'll start to get answers. Information will be revealed to you. Where do these answers come from? I mean, they come from so down deep inside your being that no scientist has a clue. I mean, you might get several answers, and the answers might contradict each other. You might have to enter into maybe a Gemara-like argument between those voices and those ideas. So ask the question clearly. How do you want to face this challenge? Do you want to respond well? Do you want to respond by just getting by? Do you want to respond great? Or do you want to respond in the best possible way that you can? That's the right question to ask. What would be the best possible response in the world that I could come up with right now facing this challenge? What is the most noble, the most loving, the most heroic, the most compassionate, the most wise? What is the best possible response right now? That's why your purpose isn't found. Your purpose is forged. It's like the challenges of life, they force us to find our way. They forge our path toward victory. The challenges push us to rise to this occasion. The challenge is the way to bring out our best possible self, a self that we can admire, a self that honors what it means to be created in the image of God, a self that's a light to the people who need us, that are around us. It's like in tragedy, we can either choose to become bitter or we can choose to become better. We can lose our faith or we can apply our faith.
Shalom, my name is Jeremy Gimpel. A few months ago, we started an online seminar teaching life-changing biblical wisdom revealed from the original Hebrew and straight from the mountains of Judea. With global instability on the rise, more and more people are turning to God, realizing now they don't exactly know where to look for guidance. The Bible says the guidance will come from the land of Israel. What started as an online seminar has grown into a global fellowship with hundreds of members from over 30 countries. We're participating in fulfilling prophecy as we learn the Bible through the eyes of prophecy, with a focus on what it's telling about us in our lives today. What you will discover is that the wisdom transmitted thousands of years ago is speaking directly to us in our time right now. Instead of learning the Bible as a religion, it's the Torah of Israel, the living guidance of God. So please join us for our next online gathering and get access to the full library of teachings that the Land of Israel Fellowship is offering. Join now and get an audio series on the prophecy encoded in the book of Joshua, absolutely for free. Just click on the link below or email fellowship@thelandofisrael.com. I don't know how you found this video or what compelled you to click on that link, but I don't believe in coincidence, and I would encourage you to take the next step on your journey toward the Land of Israel. I hope to see you at the Land of Israel Fellowship. Shalom.